Hello, everyone. It's Friday morning. Want to talk about bankruptcy. Pretty obvious from the title there. Um, there's a lot to do with bankruptcy. Actually, it all has to do with bankruptcy in terms of how a country functions, why it does what it does, and a lot of the issues that we see with vaccinations, with GMOs, with I mean, you name it, just about anything. Keeping jails full of victimless crimes, people that have committed victimless crimes. Fines, penalties, licenses, all of that stuff. It all boils back to bankruptcy, which is why people that know me know that I'm so big on the birth certificate. Why that is it's not even the birth certificate, it's the registration of the estate that the certificate certifies exists. Okay, so, bankruptcy is why this is all happening. Okay, that's why everything is going on and people are having trouble figuring it out. So let's talk about the bankruptcy. You know, Everyone thinks that, oh, the country's in debt, the country's in debt, the country's in debt. Well, that's true. It's always been in debt. It's never been out of debt. It's never one time been out of debt. Okay. So I'm going to explain why that is. So first off, let me back up and say anyone running around thinking that they're not a bankrupt entity is sleeping. I don't care how woke you are. I don't care how spiritually attuned you are asleep because you are bankrupt. Okay? In this physical body, you are bankrupt. Forget the spiritual right now. You can be spiritually solvent all you want. You're still bankrupt. Okay? Here's how this works. All right, we're going to talk about the bankruptcy. When a bank comes in, a private bank, which by the way can be me or you, we can be a bank. If we were to go in and we were to say to a country, hey, country, that gold and silver you have is awfully cumbersome. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to issue you I'm going to print nice, pretty paper for you. So we'll put out the money for you at an interest rate, just like a credit card, no different, compound interest, okay? So they do that to the country. Now, way back when, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, when they were doing this, kings and queens weren't very quick with banking, so they got caught in, yes, sure, print our money at 6% or whatever the percentage rate was. Well, within a few years, the king or queen or the sovereign entity of the country had to do what? They had to pay the interest. Well, what were they going to pay it with? They're going to pay the interest on the fake money with real money, which was their gold and their silver. So once their gold and their silver was all given over to the bank to pay the interest, who now owned the country? It wasn't the king and the queen. It's not the sovereign entity. It's the bank, because you've now bankrupted the sovereign entity. Same thing happened here in the United States of America. It's different than the United States. Same thing has happened in Canada, England, Australia. All these almost every country out there is bankrupt and has been bankrupt. And the ones that aren't bankrupt are the ones that we go to war with. Go figure. So this is when people are trying to figure out all this, how are they doing this? And, I'm going to stand up for my rights and this, that, and the other. There's no standing up for your rights in a bankruptcy. You are in a bankruptcy receivership. It's really very simple. All right. And you will be in a bankruptcy receivership until the day you die. And you will still be bankrupt after that, even after you're dead. Okay. Your soul goes on, however, if you want to get into spiritual speak, karmically speaking, you're going to live out the same thing the next time, because you didn't quite get it this time around. No matter how evolved, how spiritual, how much you've ascended, you're going to come back around to experience this, okay? Because this is all a very spiritual mechanism of bankruptcy and solvency. So when you can stand up and say, I'm solvent, and you know how and why you're solvent, that's a very spiritual standing. And it takes balls, okay? Balls means you have, how could I say it? Means that you are not afraid. You may be afraid, you may have fear, but you're not afraid to face it, okay? So anytime you're trying to evolve spiritually, fear is your test. So for people that don't understand all this law stuff and everything that we talk about, a lot of people in the spiritual community, I want to tie that together. Your fear, no matter how evolved or woke you think you are spiritually, if I say to you, you go over there and you tell that IRS agent he is completely wrong and out of line, and then you go after him and you tremble in fear, you've got something to overcome spiritually. You really do. Okay. When you get a collection letter from a debt collector, or if you do, and you start to fear and get upset, you still have work to do spiritually. Okay. If you get pulled over and you are afraid to stand up for yourself in a peaceful way, I'm not saying anyone should battle anyone or go. Standing up for yourself is peaceful when it's done the right way. But if you're afraid of that, you still have spiritual work to do. Okay, so that's my take on the spirituality thing. And now we're going to get back to the bankruptcy. You are bankrupt, no matter what. You are bankrupt. Okay, what they did was the banks came in, especially now. We've always been bankrupt. Okay, well, I'm going to specifically talk about the United States of America and the United States. We've always been bankrupt. Okay. We're bankrupt from the beginning. Okay, we had the Revolutionary War. Now, we did break away from England, for a quick period of time, Declaration of Independence. That was all set up too. However, it did take effect, and it did last through the Articles of Confederation until Washington started putting together the Constitutional Convention, and under the premise that there's no money, which was his response to someone that asked him why he felt they needed a constitution and the Articles of Confederation weren't good enough. His response was no money. Okay, so what happens is, what happened was they developed this constitution. There were some steps prior. I know there's a lot more history. I'm trying to give everybody the straight and narrow. Okay, there was no money because the United States of America, as the 13 colonies united, as the United States of the continent of America, or on the continent of America, were bankrupt as sovereign entities together because Russia and France had to come fight this war. Okay, a bunch of guys with muskets and pitchforks did not win that war. Okay, that was not how it went down. Okay, the Revolutionary War was won by aid from other countries that needed to be paid back. Okay, well, how are you going to pay them back if you don't have any money? Well, you can't. This is what Washington was saying. We're bankrupt. There's no money. How are you going to function as a sovereign entity, as a new country, as a new society with no money? You can't. So he and his cronies, put together a bankruptcy trust. Okay, it's a bankruptcy trust organization called, and that document is called the Constitution. The Constitution is no more than a trust. It's just a trust document. Okay, everyone's, the Constitution, people think that this is marvelous thing, and it's just a trust. That's it. Plain and simple. Okay, and the trust wasn't really written for we the people, because we're not the people. Okay, the people, if you read the preamble, it tells you who the people are. The people of the United States. The United States is not the people in each individual state. This has been proven over and over throughout the years with tons of research. Okay, the United States of America are the Union states, the republic government states. They are not the federal people of the United States. So right from the beginning, there's deception right in the preamble. Why does the preamble say both United States and United States of America in the same paragraph? Okay, they are two different organizations, or two completely different. They're not, even though they're similar, they're different. Okay, just because it's similar doesn't make them the same. So the United States starts up this organization as a bankruptcy, as it's a bankrupt entity in receivership. Okay, it's in receivership of the property. Let's read a quick. We'll read a quick Wikipedia explanation of receivership. Okay, now, all right, for all you that want to poo-poo the Wikipedia thing, I'll be honest with you. Wikipedia, in terms of law, you can find some really good abbreviated, short, Reader's Digest version and get an understanding from Wikipedia, because I have, and I've been in tons of law books. So trust me, it's pretty damn good sometimes to really just put it straight. So in law, receivership is a situation in which an institution or an enterprise is held by a receiver, okay, which is a person placed in the custodial responsibility for the property of others. So far so good. Sounds exact. Okay. Including tangible and intangible assets and rights. Okay. Assets and rights. Especially in cases where a company cannot meet financial obligation or enters bankruptcy. Okay, so we have a trust here because you've got a receiver. Okay, it says is a person placed in the custodial responsibility. That means someone is holding property in custody. What is that? That is a trust, because you trust someone with the property for the benefit of another. Okay, so the receivership, let's go on. Okay, the receivership remedy is an equitable remedy that emerged in the English Chancery courts, where receivers were appointed to protect real property. So everybody out there running around saying, why are they doing this? Why are they doing this? How can they do this? They can't do that. It's because they're protecting the property from you, because you are the enemy, because you don't have a right or claim on the property. What is the property? Everything that's attached to that Social Security number. It's not your property, okay? It's the property of the entity which is bankrupt. So it's held in receivership by the state until you come and claim it and ascend into solvency. This is a simple equation. It's not hard. What is hard is application and the right steps to free yourself from bankruptcy and elevate out of receivership. Okay, then you turn around and you express the trust, and now you say, hey, now you're holding the property that I have a claim on as beneficiary. Now the ball game changes. Okay, so we're going to get into a little bit more. Receiverships are also a remedy of last resort in litigation involving the conduct of executive agencies that fail to comply with constitutional or statutory obligations to populations that rely on those agencies for their basic human rights. Let's read that again. Receiverships are also a remedy of last resort in litigation involving the conduct of executive agencies that fail to comply with constitutional or statutory obligations to populations that rely on those agencies for their basic human rights. Does anybody understand what that just said? Okay. Receiverships are a remedy of last resort in litigation involving the conduct of executive agencies. The President of the United States is an executive agency, whether you like it or not, okay, that fail to comply with constitutional or statutory obligations. This all happened at the Civil War, folks, okay, when they failed to comply with the Constitution. We're going to touch on that bankruptcy point in a minute, okay, that fail to comply with constitutional statutory obligations to populations that rely on those agencies for their basic human rights. Okay, let's go back to the Civil War. 70 years prior to the Civil War, what happened? The Revolutionary War, we're bankrupt. So they put together the bankruptcy charter, right? The Constitution. Every 70 years, a country is relieved from bankruptcy. Okay, bankruptcy is forgiven. It's 7 years for a human being. It's 70 for countries. 70 years later, when we were about to be forgiven for bankruptcy, all of a sudden, a civil war breaks out. Okay, today, all the sleepwalkers are made to believe the Civil War had something to do with slavery, and it absolutely did not. Had nothing to do with slavery at all. Okay, it actually, slavery was used as a fit and necessary war measure. If you read the Emancipation Proclamation that Lincoln wrote in Pennsylvania, okay, was about freeing the slaves as a fit and necessary war measure. Read the document. It's right there. This is not an argument of historical fact. It's in the document, okay? And what happened at that time, if you look at the surrounding result, was that the slaves who were on the plantations and stuff in the South, okay, were now free. And the thing with that was the men that owned the plantations were fighting against the North on the battlefield. So what do you think would happen if you had a bunch of slaves that you treated like shit and your husband wasn't around and there were no men around because they were all on the battlefield, and now all of a sudden your slaves are declared free? You don't think they're going to come in the house and beat you up and rape you, or at least the fear of that, you know, and kill you? And I mean, some slave owners were nice and had a family type thing with their slaves, but there were a lot of guys that were afraid. So guess what they did? They left the battlefield and they ran home. The South was kicking the shit out of the North until that time. Until the Emancipation Proclamation, the South was winning. That turned the whole war around. This was all a setup. There were masterminds behind this. This is not Lincoln, okay? Lincoln was duped, unfortunately, which is why he took a bullet, okay? So let's get back to the bankruptcy. So the bankruptcy is about to be forgiven after 70 years, all right? So what happens? Another war. Can't afford that. Bankruptcy again. Oh, you're in bankruptcy for another 70 years. That's when they reorganized everything, okay? They did the the Reconstruction Act, bankruptcy reorganization. Everything went into military martial law, Lieber Code status. That's when they did the Act of 1871, where they incorporated Washington, D.C. As a municipality that could have its own laws and do whatever. I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. Where DC was incorporated. We're not going to get into that. The bottom line is there was a reorganization of the bankruptcy. Okay. So bankruptcy in receivership. Okay. The biggest bankruptcy reorganization happened the next 70 years when the country was about to be forgiven again. 1930, 70 years after the start of the Civil War. 1930, what happened? Stock market crash. I mean, these events are so in alignment. Anybody saying that's conspiracy theory clearly does not have common sense. It's not about conspiracy theory. It's about the way the events have laid out and the facts of how monetary economic systems actually work. And the alignment of the two, the events mixed with how the facts of how banking works, clearly common sense can say, well, it's a damn good theory, okay? Everything is a theory until proven. It's no longer a theory for me because I've already done specific stuff based off of these facts. And obviously gotten the results that I had intended. So it's not a theory. So now you have bankruptcy, again, reorganization, 1930, 1933, they reorganized the bankruptcy, okay, under the New Deal. They've always got these great names to let us know what they're doing, right? So again, bankruptcy and receivership. Well, now it wasn't a war we were bankrupt from. It was the bank. They finally got in. Okay, so the bank orchestrated the wars prior because we didn't want a central bank here, because we knew what that meant, because we were awake, a lot more awake back then than we are today about how this stuff actually works. So it took a while to put the people to sleep. Once the people got to sleep all the way up to 1930, they were like, now's the time, bam. 1913, 1912, when they instituted the Federal Reserve, the private bank, okay, which loaned the United States its paper fiat currency, which at a certain percentage rate, printing all those dollar bills quickly ate up all that gold we supposedly had or have, which we don't. So it bankrupted us again, which was the 1930 cover-up of the stock market crash, was the cover-up to cover this entire thing up. So the country again dives into bankruptcy. This time, they have nothing left to pay. So what do they pledge as payment to the bank for the bankruptcy? Go ahead, I'll wait. I know some of you guys got this down lock, stock, and barrel. What did they pledge? Simple. So easy, simple. They pledged your soul, your children's souls, your grandchildren's souls, everybody else's souls that registers with the state and the county registrar, your labor. They pledged your soul through your labor, and they also pledged all your land, any land you will ever own or think you own. All right, so this is why everything is happening. Okay, now they couldn't pledge your labor and your land and your soul without a remedy. And the remedy is, again, that they're holding the property in receivership. And if you claim that property privately, not going into some public venue in court and fighting them and trying to expose it all, because you'll never get that. If you claim it privately, you do now have a different standing. Standing is important. Anytime you go into a court right now, if you have not perfected your claim and you don't have anything to back that up, if you ever have a financial issue where you wind up in a court, a civil court matter, a criminal court matter, as long as you didn't hurt anybody, it's called quasi-criminal. There's no injured party, there's no crime, no intent, no crime. However, most of these crimes are quasi. If you're going into court, what you're doing is you're going in as a bankrupt that has no right to discharge the charges with the estate, because you did not claim the estate which they pledged to pay the bank. So this whole thing with the gold fringe flag and all of that stuff is merely symbolizing to you, this is a bank. Okay, that's why, where do you see gold fringe flags? In all public buildings and in all banks. Banks are the only private buildings you're going to see the gold fringe flag in. Okay, you're not going to see it in any other private building. You'll see it in every public building, and the only private buildings are banks. Use common sense, man. This stuff is everywhere. It's right in our faces. So when you go into court, you're going into a bank. You're going into a military protected bank. When you go into the bank, it's protected by the military under that flag. Okay, and this all boils down to the Trading with the Enemy Act that was amended by the Emergency Banking Relief Act. Okay, it is a bank, period. So unless you do certain maneuvers to come out of bankruptcy and become solvent, you will never own anything. Never. And quite honestly, you can't own anything anyway. Your estate owns it. It's held in trust for you. All right. And I know for a fact that this stuff is right on point just because of my own experience and, what we do daily with my friends and family and people that I'm close with and work with. And you'll see it even on the internet with people that get remedy, okay, or some sort of discharge or something like that. The key is knowing that it's all financial and it's all bankruptcy. That's first. Then knowing how to evolve and ascend into solvency is second. And you can't do that until you claim the estate properly. You cut off various contracts. You renegotiate the Social Security contract, okay, on the SS5. There are steps to take to do that. But once you do that, you now have standing because you are solvent. You're no longer under the king's charity, okay? You no longer need the king's benefits. But you have a right to them anyway, because for using your shit, they have to give you the benefits or give your estate the benefits. So you still have a right to the benefits without being subject to the king, because the king said, hey, I'm going to borrow, I'm going to take all, just going to take it, and then you're going to borrow it, but for this, you have a way out. All you got to do is claim it, So that's why everything is happening the way that it's happening. That's why people are saying they can't get justice. That's why, people want to fix the system. The system's working perfectly fine. It's working as a bankruptcy receivership, like a fine, well-oiled machine. It is not working any way crooked or wrong or false or anything. Because when you have a bankruptcy receivership what is happening, you don't have to follow a constitution. You don't have to follow any of that. All right? They're in receivership. They're the custodians of the property. They're in receivership. None of that other shit applies. They can do whatever they want until you take the estate back into probate, and there is no discretion at that point. Okay? That's why probate, who the hell shows up in probate court? No one. It's all paper. Very rare circumstances do you get held in probate in court, like actually physically go to court. Can you go search probate records? Not really. You might be able to search to see if there was a will that was entered, but you can't, because it's all private. Probate is where it's all going down, folks. Probate. I've said this for years and years and years. It's where it's all gone down. It's why the general executor position, the office, you have to hold the office. If you don't hold the office of the general executor with broad general powers over the estate, you got nothing. You got nothing. And not only holding the general executive position, but also having the power of attorney to operate it. If you don't have that, you're done. And I'd even venture to say, power of attorney expressed is one thing, but power of attorney implied is another. Okay, just as powerful. I've done this stuff with power of attorney implied without even having an express power of attorney recorded. So there's a lot of people out there with a ton of detail in this stuff, which is great. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have detail, but what I'm saying is I was able to perform procedures, okay, that will pretty much conclude that all of this is very solid, okay, without having some of or a lot of those details. Okay, so people have heard me talk about some things before, such as, the right to travel and helping a guy out when they confiscated his car and arrested him and told him he was going to spend a couple years in jail and $3,000 fine. And we turned the courtroom into a kangaroo court, and we walked out of there, said, you're not doing any of that. Nobody's pleading today. Nobody's begging for your mercy. Basically piss off. We're out of here. We'll take care of you and everybody else on the back end, on the private side. And that's what we did. So the next month, the man got everything back. The judge told him he was the most intelligent man he'd ever seen. Everybody was happy. No fines, no prison, no insurance hikes, no, they didn't keep the fake tags, the fake ID. It was all given back to us, all of it given back. There you go. That was the second time that I had done something like that. So same thing, same thing with, what was the other one? Oh, the IRS, IRS, the same thing. I mean, we've done that too, but basically all the principles are the same. Bankruptcy receivership. Learn who you are within the bankruptcy and learn how to become the executor of the estate, to settle the estate, to manage the affairs of the state, come of the age of discretion. I see a lot of people saying the age of majority, the age of majority, I'm the age of majority. Well, that doesn't mean you're of the age of discretion. That just means you're of the age to contract legally. So I stopped using the age of majority. I am of the age of discretion and majority. I am of the age to contract, and I'm of the age of discretion, which means I'm of the age to handle my business affairs. I'm competent. I'm not a minor. I'm not an insolvent. I'm not an insolvent, period. And I've got the documentation that shows that the estate is not insolvent, and it actually has a surety, because a surety can definitely back the estate, right? Well, a trust can be a surety all day long, And recently I've had some people ask me, about things that they've gotten into or trouble or whatever. And this is the same thing I tell everybody, and I'll repeat this. I got to plug this in. Hang on. If you don't take care of the estate from the beginning and already have that taken care of, it doesn't matter. Okay? A lot of this stuff doesn't work after the fact. Okay? When people go, oh my God, what do I do now? Well, it's not about what you do now. It's what you should have done 2 years ago when I told you to start handling the business of the estate and setting yourself up, making your claim, making your records before shit happens. Before shit happens. Not after. It's too late. It's too late. It's too late. So, again, learn what bankruptcy is. It will definitely open your eyes, make things a little easier, it has for me, When you understand the bankruptcy receivership, you understand how government works. Period. You can see it when you read stuff like this. I mean, it's so blatantly obvious, I mean, again, let's read a little more. Receiverships can be broadly divided into two types. Those related to insolvency or enforcement of a security interest. Right? Who's got the security interest here? Who's got the security interest on all those green notes that you're using, those Federal Reserve notes? Who's got the security interest on it? It's not the United States. It's the Federal Reserve. The United States has the obligation to pay that back, which is why the 14th Amendment after the Civil War said the public debt shall not be questioned. The public debt has nothing to do with your infrastructure. The public debt merely has to do with how much debt people are creating every single day by signing their name on these stupid, credit card receipts and debit cards, and all of that shit is just creating more debt because the bank has to put out more of their paper fiat currency. We could solve that. We could take the whole entire country out of bankruptcy overnight. That simple. If everyone had a claim on their estate, not even everyone, if a handful of people had a claim on their estate and issued an instrument for a couple trillion, or whatever the case may be, or you get enough people to issue it for, a couple million till you get a couple trillion, bam, done, overnight, bank, the whole entire debt is gone, which is a lot of what I believe, some of these people in the past were doing and why they got taken out, because they can't have us out of bankruptcy, okay? So let's read the second type of receivership. Okay, we already went over those related to insolvency or enforcement of a security interest. The next is those where either a person is incapable of managing their affairs. Sound familiar? And so the court appoints a receiver to manage the property on their behalf. Sound like a prosecutor? For example, a receiver appointed by a court of protection under mental health legislation, in some jurisdictions called conservatorship. Okay, so that is an example. Okay, now there are two types. So we went over the first one. There are two parts to the second type. That was the first part. Second part is the government seizes control of property due to breaches of law or regulation. I mean, how much more clear can you get that to show that this is how they're operating? I mean, this is about receivership in bankruptcy. This is not about government and all, but they're telling you this is how they're operating. All you need to do is look around and watch how they do it. They do it exactly according to this. It has nothing to do with your rights and your freedom and your, I'm going to change the system for the better. And this system is functioning, dude. And it's functioning well, Okay, so let's read on. Receiverships relating to insolvency are subdivided into two further categories. Administrative receivership, where the receiver is appointed wide management powers, general, okay, wide management means general, okay, wide, okay, so let's replace management with general, is appointed general powers over all or most of the property of a business. And other receiverships, sometimes misleadingly called fixed charge receiverships, okay, where the receiver has limited control over specific property with no broader powers beyond managing or selling the individual asset. Wow. Sounds like they have general receivership, okay, general powers over all or most of the property, just like it says. And it seems like they've given us maybe fixed charge receivership, where the receiver has limited control over specific property with no broader powers beyond managing or selling the individual asset. Okay, so that could be any asset tied to the Social Security. I'm not saying that's exactly how it works, but it seems pretty damn close. I'm just saying. Okay, receivers are appointed in different ways. Government regulator appointed, privately appointed, court appointed. Okay. The receiver's powers flow from the documents underlying his appointment, i.e., a statute, okay, financing agreement, or court order, financing agreement. Okay, that's our power right there. All right. However, they can get their power of appointment from a statute. So as long as the statute says they have the authority to come in and do this, that, or the other, that's why they're doing it. They're a receiver. They're acting in receivership. They have a right to screw you because you do not have a right to their property. It's so incredibly simple. It's difficult to unwind. Number one, because there's so much resistance pushing against unwinding this for our individual selves. Not even forget the collective. I'm just talking about even our individual selves. There's so much resistance. That's what's difficult. The concepts are cake, man. Totally easy. The rest is hard. That's where your spiritual awareness and your level of faith comes in. Because if you have any fear in you whatsoever about standing up and saying, no, I am in peace and honor, and I am the one that's solvent, and I am not in bankruptcy anymore, and here's why: I've done my due diligence. Here's all my records. Bam, 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 bam. Here's where you guys were notified that I was taking over the estate, okay, as the general executor with broad powers, okay, to administrate the estate out of receivership. You know, that's where your spirituality comes in. Okay, it goes on. Duties of a receiver. I mean, there's so much, you know. Yeah. Anyway, I just looked up receivership on Wikipedia. That's all I'm reading this from. Now, the way that I research and do things is, like I said, I'll first take a word like that, and I will then dive right into the law dictionary to understand what the word receivership means. Wikipedia did a pretty good job of laying that out. So what I would do now, which I've already done about all this stuff, but I'm just trying to give people the way that I study this stuff. I will then go and start looking up on the internet all other kinds of information related to receivership, keeping in my mind the whole time that it's very possible that the governments of the world have held our property in receivership because they're all bankrupt. They are all if they're using and registering people, okay, births, they're bankrupt. If they have a central bank, okay, that is not their own country's treasury, they're bankrupt. Period. It is that simple. And they're in receivership. So when people ask me about, can this be done in my country? Hell yeah, the way I see it, it can be. And you really don't need to relate to any statute. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. But honestly, you really don't need to start writing all this statutory garbage about what gives you the authority to do this. You know, you can't, if you're using their authority, their statutes and codes, what did this just say? Okay? It said that you're acting as a receiver. But you're not a receiver. They didn't appoint you. You're not acting as a receiver. You start using all their statutes and codes, you're saying, yeah, I'm a receiver. And they're going, really? You're a thief. That's what you are. Because you're coming in here and you're trying to administrate our property and you weren't appointed to do that. And we're here to protect it for Robert Michael. And because you're not Robert Michael, at least we have no documentation saying so or, you know, certified. Get out of here. Here's your charges. Pay them. That's what's happening. That's what's happening with the whole thing. So, anyway, I hope this was informative. I hope it puts things in more perspective. You know, go on your journey, do your thing, you know. I don't get upset about this stuff. I enjoy it. I don't look at it as, oh, that's heavy and negative, and let me just forget that it exists, and my whole world will change, and I'll be so spiritually attuned, and nothing will matter. Because you'll say that until it comes down one day. And then you go, how did my energy align with this? How did I manifest this shitty situation? And how do I get out of it? Well, you know, it happens, folks. It happens to the best people. You know, it really does. So anyway, I got work to do. I've got a lot of stuff to get done, and I'm going to go. So you all have a great weekend and have a great Friday. I'll send out a newsletter. I'll do a write-up on this and send out a newsletter through the Truth and Trust site, which is being overhauled. So if you go on there and things kind of seem wonky, just bear with me. I'm making it much more streamlined, you know, putting things together. It's going to take me a while. Obviously, I've been working on it for a long time, but the problem for me, just so everybody knows, is I'm constantly trying to help people. I can't help people anymore. This is the way that I'm helping you. If I'm going to help, I'm going to tell you what I know, tell you what I've done, and allow you to help yourself, because I cannot help each individual person. Now, if we have a business relationship, meaning you come to me and we work on drafting a trust, that's different. That is a business relationship. You know, I am being paid for my time, so that is different. However, Don't come to me looking for legal advice. Don't come to me looking for how to get out of your problems, because if you watch my videos and you listen to what I'm telling you, you'll already know. And you should already be set up long before anything happens. That's the key. Not waiting till shit happens. Okay? So, anyway, have a good day, everybody. Much love to you all. Gotta have that. Okay? Don't be afraid. Don't be fearful. It's all good. They're waiting for us to do this. Let's bring ourselves into solvency and have a great freaking weekend.